it was already very clear that it was so present that we were still actually in the same moment, sadly. So it didn't feel like something, it never felt like a period piece. It felt like something that was about us and is still going on.
And even though this is a period that you have heard about your whole life, what was the research part for you to sort of get deeper into the details of this period?
I had heard it, so my initial understanding of it was very personal, from my parents, from friends, from a friend's mother who's from the village that this is based on, where this incident happened with the bus. She's a survivor of that and the Nakba. So it was oral history and personal at first, and then with the reading, I just started reading everything, and there's a lot. There hasn't been really any films, I think any, made about this period, but there's a lot of British historians, Israeli historians, Palestinian historians. I was reading a lot, and then I learned a lot about I didn't realize, because I'd always heard about the sort of it as a revolt. I didn't realize how violent it was, and I didn't realize, it was through the research I understood how much of what we are living today was established as a system at that moment.
Is there archival footage from any particular archive?
I think the archive, there was a lot. It was the British, I always say they were really good at filming everything. They filmed everything because they did newsreels. Before films, they used to have newsreels about all the places around the world. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the newsreels. It's just like they just jump from like country to country about sort of a quick update with a very funny voice about what's happening. And so there was a lot of material to look at, which was part of course, the research, part of to see that world. And we used it a lot in terms of when we prepared with the production designer, costume designer, and everything. And I fell in love with the archives, and it was also integrated into the script, and it was part of the story for me.
I mean, and in using it in your film, you just sort of recontextualize the images, right? Because when they were part of a newsreel, they sort of were feeding a different narrative.
Yeah, they're feeding a different narrative, and there's this voiceover that's almost it's silly actually. It's like a funny day in Jerusalem, and it's like. And I found them, the archive, those images I just kept looking at them and looking at all the details of them and the people's faces in them and wondering, that nobody has any idea what's coming. That in 10 years or 12 years, all of this is the beginning. 75% of our population become refugees in 10 to 12 years. And so I look at those archives a lot and I think about that. And it was also part of the story, that the characters as well, there's promise, there's potential. There's a character like Amir. They don't know we don't know what's coming, and I was interested in that. Of course, we watch it today and we know exactly what happened. But
I mean, talk about the production of the film. I understand that you had to shoot it in Jordan, but eventually you were able to return to shoot it in Palestine. Talk about that journey of the production.
Yeah, the whole thing was supposed to be was prepared for Palestine. And we had a village. We restored an old village. We'd spent 10 months prepping this village, restoring it with people from that village. We planted crops. We built British vehicles, army vehicles, those big tanks. We built all the weapons. We built all of that, the costumes, everything. It was an immense project for us, and bigger than how we normally work, and I think for all of us it was the biggest thing we had done. And so we started this prep so early because we wanted to be ready for it. And then after October 7th, everything was shut down. We lost everything. We couldn't film in that village anymore. We couldn't film at all. So we shot certain scenes in Jordan. The village in the scene is actually way up in the north of Jordan. We were never able to go back to the village that we were supposed to film in. And then things spread, things got worse over the last 2 years, and we eventually came back, and I pushed to come back to Palestine and to film in Palestine, and I didn't want to film anywhere else, and that made certain compromises. Some of my cast was not able to enter. Some of the cast also, after what happened, not only did we lose everything, but there was no more insurance. No insurance was going to cover a film shooting at this moment. Agents weren't going to let their clients come. So we had to shrink down and rethink things, and I rewrote certain things. I had to write certain actors out of scenes.
I want to talk about the title. It's so simple in essence, but I think the date just really is a confrontation of how long this has been going on, 90 years, and really says something about this notion of October 7 or even the Nafka, that it's been going on even further than that. Did you always know that was the title?
No, I had a different title. I had a different title for 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, one title for 8 years, and that I changed the title because there was another film with a very similar title that came out, and everybody was very confused by it, so I mourned my title a little bit, but then stumbled across this, and it was, the first title was a little poetic actually, and this one was very straightforward and simple, and there was something about simplicity that also made sense to me, that it was like in these dark moments of our life, I just needed simplicity, and so Palestine 36 became and not 1936, but 36, because leave a little bit of an openness to it. I don't know.
Can you talk about writing the screenplay and the sort of weaving in the threads of, I find it very interesting that there's a Christian character, and there's sort of people from, a wealthier class, a journalist, sort of like all integrated into the story is really fascinating.
Yeah, the story, so Yusuf was always my central character, but it was never about him. It was about many characters and how they all came together to form this bigger picture and tell the bigger story. It's sort of based on two villages, a fictional sort of recreation of two villages. One is a village right outside of Jerusalem, and one is the village where this incident that happens in the film happened. And I sort of mixed those two cities. They're both, Muslim Christian villages, as most villages of Palestine are or were. And the journalist, there's Yusuf's totally a fictional character. The journalist is also, like the two villages, a mix between two Palestinian women, historical figures. One was a socialite in Jerusalem, was having beautiful parties with the British. She was actually also having an affair with the secretary of the High Commissioner. The other one was a journalist in Haifa. I sort of mixed that. And then there's the actual characters that are Wingate. The High Commissioner woke up. These are all, based on real characters.
I feel like the film really takes to task the British, the way that they set up the system of oppression that continues, the foundation for that. I think that's, it's fascinating that you confronted so face on. Did that present a challenge to cast British actors because it was sort of confrontational to the point?
I really wanted to point the finger at the British, to be clear about it. Because it's something that's been erased, and no one talks about that. And a lot of people say to me, how come you don't have in the film like an Israeli and or a Jewish and a Palestinian character? I'm like, forget the trope, forget the fantasy that you want to have this. Let's keep the focus. Let's put the blame where the blame is. Yeah, so for me it was like, just no, my gaze was there. It's our point of view of these years. 108 years ago, British came to our lands. They divided it up. They controlled it. They played all sides. And it's strange also that no one remembers that or talks about it. because it's, the empire where the sun didn't set. I think all of us maybe have that in common, the British or the French, Yeah, exactly. So the British characters, the actors were on board and wonderful. I had a lot of support from the British co-producers, and I had support from the British Film Institute and BBC Films. And that sort of tricked me a little bit, because I thought, this is amazing. There's like a lot of love and a lot of understanding of this. And a woman from the BFI said to me, we're really gonna, it's time to it's time to confront our colonial past, and we face that. So I thought, this is like, okay, the British are confronting their past. But then when I said that in front of my actors, the British actors, they were like, it's not at all the case. You know that we don't learn any of this in school. We've never been taught this. It's still not taught in schools. All of this is erased. It's not there. We learn about, I don't know, the Romans, and then we jump to this. Like, we don't. This whole entire side of history is not there.
Your cast is wonderful, but I wanted to point out Salih Bakri, who has been in, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, he's been in most of your films, your novel, and he's in a lot of Palestinian stories. He's really kind of the face of Palestinian cinema these days. I've seen him in at least 2 or 3 films this year. Talk about bringing him to this one.
Yeah, Salih. So Salih and I I cast him in his first film, which was my first film, also Salt of the Sea. He was a theater actor, did an audition, and we started working together. And from then on, I always work with him. He's very much a partner, and he's a very, very good friend of mine. And we live near each other. Our kids are friends. Like, he's somebody who's been a very integral part of, I think, my whole film career now. So for me, he was Khalid when I wrote the script. It was Salih that I had in mind. And what was interesting was how that connected to Karim, who plays Yusuf, because for me, when I wrote the script, Yusuf looked very different. Yusuf was a dark-eyed. I had a very specific idea of what Yusuf looked like in my mind. And when Karim came to audition, and he had those like crazy eyes and he kind of looks like Salih, like in a way. I was like, I don't want to cast this guy. Like, I've already got Salih. Like, there's just too many blue-eyed people in this film. So I didn't want to. But Karim was so amazing, and I just couldn't get his audition out of my head. And and it was his first film, and he's a beautiful soul, and he's very much like Yusuf, actually.
Before I pass it on to the audience, I wanted to ask you about the beautiful poem that you used to close the film, which I feel really brings it to the present.
Yeah, that's a poet from Gaza who was killed in December 2023 with his whole family. They were bombarded. They were in their apartment asleep, and he's an amazing poet. And the poem, I think, is a beautiful poem about resilience. And how we just, no matter, we keep going on. And that was, for me, the film. That's Afra at the end. It was all connected, but I felt, like you said, it's about now, like how the film nothing ever feels like it's the past. It's just, we keep going, and it's cyclical, for better or for worse. Like, we're in this thing that keeps going, and it waxes and it wanes, but it's never really ended, and we've been in a very, very long struggle for our freedom. And I felt like that I coming to that without pushing it too much. The poem was a good way to do it. I didn't want to. Someone once suggested to me, why don't you cut to like Gaza today, like images? No, it's like, this is the story. And the poem, to me, represented something about how it's still going without being too much.
Beautiful. Any questions from the audience? I tried to see you because it's really not right here.
2 questions. First of all, the lieutenant with the long hair, why didn't you kill him? But seriously, why didn't you? I would have gotten so much relief from that. Second question, more an appreciation. I'm from there. I grew up with this my entire life. 47 forward, I'll tell you all this stuff, I know it all. This whole 36 to 42, 43 period, I'm not familiar with, and I'm grateful to you, because now I gotta start researching it. Subsequent, I know it all. Before, I know it all. That period of time, I was never really, it never came up in context, never came up in anything that I was taught, and I was taught a lot about it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I feel like every time I speak this film, there's like 10 Palestinians in the audience say to me, my grandfather was, in the revolt, everybody has a story about it. I don't know, maybe you've got some family history you gotta dig up. Wingate is based on, an actual figure who was really, really unhinged. And I was fascinated. The Israelis consider him the godfather. He wasn't Jewish. He was a Christian Zionist. They consider him the godfather of the Israeli army. He was an expert at counterterrorism, and he had very unorthodox tactics. And he was for us, a horribly violent person. So he's seen as a hero by some, and others as a terror. And he was a really tricky character to actually write, because I didn't want to have this the quintessential bad guy. It's not interesting in film that if he's too much. Again, it's this thing about too much, and when how do you do it? But right before we shot, BBC Film said, we need to sort of do a fact check on your script just to make sure. But it's a fiction, it's a fiction story that's based on reality. Do you do this with other films? Yeah. I don't know, but go ahead, here's the script. And they sent it to a British historian, and he came back and said, everything is solid, everything is exactly correct, except for Wingate, who was much worse than this film that's on. So, yeah.
Back there with the light, I guess. That's a good strategy.
Perhaps the most powerful line in the movie was when the British diplomat said to the Palestinian female journalist, "You don't know what's coming." Can you tell us more about that line? Where did it come from? Did you read it in archival documents, or was that something you took liberty to present in the film?
Yeah, the character of Thomas, he says that line, and Thomas is also based on a real person who was a secretary for the High Commissioner. He came to Palestine thinking he was doing good, like many people did, that it was a project that was going to be helpful, that had meaning. And as time went on, he gradually understood that it was not what he thought. The real Thomas quit, really did quit, and he became a Marxist. So I mean that line and that, what does he have access to as the Secretary of the High Commissioner? He's privy to all these conversations. It's, for me, it's part of his understanding of where things were going and how much that him and Khulud have this special connection, and they share stories, and they're friends. But he's privy to so much more, and World War II was coming, and the British knew that, and they had to crush this revolt quickly so that they could move on and deal with other things. So they brought in, they sort of lost control of the countryside. They couldn't understand the revolt that was happening in the cities was happening in a way that they could understand, in a diplomatic way. There was delegations and commissions and discussions, and the Palestinian upper classes were something that they could understand and communicate, and they understood it and how to control it. What was happening in the countryside with the fellahin, with the peasants, they couldn't understand, and it was gaining power, and so they had to take it to a whole other level. It brought in thousands more troops and weapons and machinery, and they had to crush that as quickly as possible, and they did. The revolt lasted from 36 to 39. By the end of and it went in two sort of phases. And after the Peel Commission, ignited the revolt again, and that's when it got really, really violent, and it crushed it, and it's important to talk about, because 10 years later then is the Nakba, the loss of Palestine, and they had already exiled the leadership. They had something called the village files. The British kept files on all the villagers, who was intellectual, who was, anti-authoritarian, who was speaking out, who was an activist. They had files on all the villages in Palestine. There was information was being collected even then. So, yeah.
Sounds familiar. Anyone else? Right here. And we'll take another one back there.
Yeah, it was a beautiful film. I thought Afra and Mr. so was wonderful, and I loved their friendship. Are they actors who filmed because they were both?
Thank you. Yeah, the two kids, Kareem goes to school with, what is his name, goes to school with my daughter. He wants to be an actor. It's his dream in life. He knows exactly what he wants to do. And he's amazing to work with. He's a very talented child. And the girl who plays Afra is from a village up in the north. She does TikTok videos, and she's like a social media, she's like a really extroverted, really funny person. And she sent in a video to me, to the casting director, in which she does in about 2 minutes 30 impersonations. It's like incredible. I was like, who is this child? She's incredible. I have to meet her. And I met her and I cast her right away. My producer was like, do you want to see other kids? I said, no, she's Afra. But I did a film called When I Saw You when I had a 12-year-old boy, and I saw 200. I auditioned 200 boys for that role before I found the one. And here I just seen that she was number 2, and I was like, I'm casting her, and it was like, you have to see other people. Like, I know that she's the one. And they were, but when you did When I Saw You, you saw 200 kids before you knew that that you found the one. I said, I know, because I couldn't find the one. But when I saw the 200th kid, I knew that he was the one. They're great. So there you are. They're new, and Kareem, plays Yusuf is his first role, and Rabab, who's her mother in the film, it's her first role also. Yeah.
And there was a question there. Yes.
Thank you for such a powerful film, emotional also. I'm curious to know about, you mentioned there's another version of the script due to the circumstances that you have to change. So I'm curious to know what's the difference, what changed?
What changed was that the original version was playing with time, a little bit experimental. It was jumping back and forth in chronology. And when I shot it like that, but then when I was in the editing room, I felt like it was distancing us, the audience, from the emotional story. It was too smart. It was like about my writing rather than the story. And I had a talk with my editor, and I said, look, I think we have 2 choices. Either it's this very smart script, I don't say it's dear to say so myself. It's a very smart story, or it's the emotional story, because we're kind of losing it, that emotion. And I was more interested in the emotional story. So, yeah.
I think we need to wrap it. I just wanted to acknowledge, thank you so much for being here and sharing your film in this difficult time. So I think that's very brave and really wonderful of you to be able to share your film with thousands of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.